Okay, so hello, good morning.
Good morning.
And thanks for those of you that came in this sleet and rain and snow today to be with us at this INME presentation of Paths to Wellbeing in a Social Media World. My name is Margaret, and I'm part of the INME board, and I want to thank everyone for being here, and I also would like to take some time to thank our sponsors. So I want to give a big shout out to the Boulder Flatirons Rotary Club for helping sponsor today's event, along with the Hope Coalition, and we have a representative here, Kathy Valentine is here, and thanks to Atonement Lutheran Church, and we have some other sponsors, Rise Against Suicide, Mental Health Partners, NAMI, Chloe's Closet, and Penn, and we have Paula Nelson is here with Penn, and we also have Mindful Works. I'm not sure if they have anything here today, but we have some tables.
They have some good
that I'd like all of you on Mindful Works. Yes, they're providing the snacks. Please go help yourself to some of those. So please check out the tables. If you don't have a program, what we're planning to do.
right here.
Here's what programs if you need one. And what we're going to do now is make sure that we have a centering exercise. So I'd like to turn it over to Mary Erdman.
Hi, everybody. Hi. So, to get us warmed up and settled down, so to speak, I want you all to close your eyes for a moment and imagine how old you were 25 years ago. Take your current age now and then do a little age regression back to 25 years ago. Probably around the year 2000. Y2K was approaching in that era, in that time. And just take a few deep breaths. And then imagine, if you will, you might have had a BlackBerry, or you might have had a flip phone back then. You might have tried to figure out how to copy your CDs onto the new iPod that just came out, the Apple iPod. And as you breathe and settle in, imagine what kind of gunk has accumulated inside your nervous system over the last 25 years since the year 2000 in terms of your life, all the events in your life, and also all the ways that we become addicted to our devices. And with those devices also the apps, with the apps also the notifications and all the stuff that has now dominated our nervous system. So another minute or so, I just want to introduce now the social media cleanse. So imagine for a moment that you have an imaginary hole at the top of your head, like a whale or a dolphin's blowhole. And as you exhale, you can exhale out through the top of your head, like a chimney, blowing out hot air or smoke. But this time I want you to breathe in and then exhale out, if you will, all of the references you have for Facebook and Twitter. Then breathe in and begin to feel a wave of relaxation and calm, breathing into the center of yourself. And as you exhale again through the top of your head, imagine that you're exhaling out YouTubes, all the media that you've ingested, that your nervous system has taken in over the years. And then breathing in, imagine that calm, peace, and tranquility, warming connections inside yourself. As you exhale out again through the top of your head, imagine what you can at least if you let go of TikTok and WhatsApp, and Pinterest, and Telegram, if many of you on Telegram. Breathe in, begin to feel what it was like before all of this 25 years ago when you had connections with family and friends, maybe pets and animals. If you go way back to that period, you might be able to exhale out through the top of your head, Friendster, or MySpace, or LinkedIn. Breathing in to the heart, to find a moment of mindfulness in the present, feeling groundedness with your body in the chair, with your feet on the ground. Exhaling out all the ripples and waves that your nervous system has reacted to all of the social media, all of the complications of life in the last 25 years. As if you can shake it out and breathe it out and purge it through the top of your head. Like swiping up and releasing all of that stuff. And then lastly, breathing back in. That wave of spiritual energy, that connectedness, that warmth, perhaps that feeling of love, peace, compassion. And now 3 last remaining breaths of clarity, exhaling and inhaling. Exhaling and inhaling. Exhaling and inhaling. Thank you all. Open your eyes. Now Rich Williams takes over.
All right, now that you're all very calm, I'm going to tell you about the fire exits in the bathrooms. So the fire exits are the door that you came in, probably. The front door wouldn't work. There's also one at the end of the hall this way, okay? So you know where those are. The bathroom is directly behind us. There are bathrooms downstairs and upstairs, if that one's occupied. And in case of any sudden decompression events, actually masks, no, sorry, wrong announcements. There is coffee and food over there. Please feel free to get up and go do that anytime. But if you do bring coffee back to your seat, please put a lid on it, okay? You don't want to make any spills here. And there are napkins and plates for the food things. All right, so buckle your seatbelts. And let me introduce Dr. Amy Margaret. So Dr. Amy Margaret is a faculty member at the Atlas Institute, University of Colorado Boulder, and is the CEO of the Post-Internet Project. She has a Ph.D. in cell and molecular biology, and Amy investigates the intersection of social technology, design, and neurobiology. She brings us today some tools, technology, techniques, and some understanding to find our way through our social media world and retain our compassion, our accessibility, and connections to others and many other good things, and in short, to find paths to well-being in this technology-heavy world. So using it to help us get where we can go and avoid damaging us and distracting us from who we really are. So let's welcome Amy Margaret.
So first of all, thank you all for showing up in the sleet and the rain and to offer your time here. I know you have a million things you could be doing. Starting out with their goals. So when you leave today, I hope that there's, like, as some of the other intro people mentioned, compassion for yourself and your own well-being in the midst of kind of the social media overwhelm. I want to speak a little bit to valuing your attention as sacred. Understanding the relationship between, I'm going to focus on adolescent neurobiology because that's my specialty, but it kind of applies to all of us and how that relates to social technologies. And then some ways we can support youth in our lives and ourselves in finding content of personal meaning and value, right? Because I think there's a piece missing where we don't go to these places with an intent to find something that serves us, but rather to allow whatever is in the feed to wash over us, right? And those are very different things. And then some foundations about how to start compassionate conversations, because a lot of us have people in our lives or ourselves who are having a hard time with these technologies, and how do we talk to them about it, right? That can be challenging. So what's the situation we're in? This is going to be, I promise it ends hopeful, okay? So I got to get dark first. I love to use this quote to open. So there are two industries that call their customers users, and those are illegal drugs and software. And this quote's a little outdated, so you can think of software nowadays like all the big tech companies. And so if you're wondering what they're worth, I'm not going to go into this too much, other than the fact that our beloved Meta here is worth $1,000 billion. And for those of you who don't know the valuation of that, the boop boop 3 over is $1 trillion. And so if you're having a hard time conceptualizing what $1 trillion is, here's $10,000, which I would be delighted to have. And so you can scale this up with the person remaining the same size. Here's $1 million. I'll stack on the floor there. You scale this up. So that is what we're looking at in terms of they're making a lot of money. You probably knew this already. I think the visual is helpful to really understand. And so this is to bring up the concept of thinking of our phones like cigarettes. So you probably, if you read the media about this, there's a lot of talking about big tech being like big tobacco, right? Compares Facebook to big tobacco. And a lot of the lawsuits that are currently happening are using some of the same ideas that were used to rein in the big tobacco companies. And some people have gone so far as to compare checking your likes to the new smoking, right? We all just need a break from reality, and how do we get that break? And I'll get into more of some of the similarities and differences in a minute. But my point is that I think that there's a lot of negative emotions out there around this topic, right? We blame the kids, we blame ourselves. But the kids and parents actually aren't at fault, because there are teams of designers and psychologists who design these products to be addictive. You know this, right? You've heard this phrase, addictive design. I assume that's probably why you're here, because you care about this. And so pull to refresh, this one. Who thinks that they can't refresh the content without you pulling it? For reference, we're like sending people to Mars now. They can definitely refresh the content without you pulling. Why do you pull? Cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. It's the same mechanism, right? Another one, why are notification bubbles red instead of green or blue or purple? Right? Because red attracts our attention, and it conveys this message of urgency. Right? This is really important. I got to take care of it right now. Who gets annoyed by the little red bubbles? Yeah, I do. Right? So that's another one. Variable reward. So this is the idea that every time you go to log in, you don't know how many notifications you're going to have, or reposts, or retweets, or likes, or comments. If every time you posted something, you got the same 10 likes from the same 10 people, it would lose its appeal pretty quickly. We're all aware of infinite scroll and autoplay. One thing about this is that the guy who invented infinite scroll, Asa Raskin, now works for the Center of Humane Tech. So if you're not familiar with that organization, they're the ones who produced The Social Dilemma. And I'm not sure he was solely responsible for the invention of infinite scroll, but is often credited with that. And so my point is that a lot of the people who were involved in the development of these addictive design features had good intentions, right? Like, let's make it easier for people. When the BlackBerry first came out, people were elated. This means I don't have to check my email all the time. It will just tell me when I have an email, right? And so I bring that up because I think a lot of times in the current milieu, there's a vilification of this, but a lot of the people who originally created these things did have intent to help humanity out. Okay, and so they are optimizing for engagement. Time on site helps that $1 trillion stack grow. And so in other words, your attention is the product that you are giving to this company for what return? I don't agree with this. I don't think our attention is a product to be extracted and commodified. I think your attention is sacred, and that this is something that we've kind of lost culturally, this idea that where and to whom and to what we give our precious attention is actually a sacred resource, This is when it comes to the end, our life is a collection of how we spent our time, right? You know this, but I think that this part of the conversation around smartphones and social media is part of what's missing. And so this is a quote from Tim Wu in The Attention Merchants. And so we must reflect that when we reach the end of our days, our life experience will equal what we have paid attention to, whether by choice or by default. We are at risk, without quite fully realizing it, of living lives that are less our own than we imagine. And so when I say the word sacred here, what I'm referring to, and it's funny, I was revisiting this article I wrote, 4 years ago about your intention is sacred. And as a scientist, I was going to publish this, and I felt a little scared, right? As somebody trained in the sciences, to put this article out there saying, I believe this is a sacred thing. And so I was looking back at this article I published in 2020, and I thought, how sweet now to be invited by this organization to come here and do this. So thank you. And so when I say the word sacred, what I really mean is that to which one is respectfully or even reverently dedicated, which I believe is what we should be to our attention. What change that might bring to the way we interact with our technologies. And this is where I talk about the fundamentals of kind of our organization. So as Rich mentioned in the intro, I am the founder of an org called Post-Internet Project. We have a lot of things going on, so I will not do too much promotion right now, but if you want to talk to me about it after, I would be so happy to do that. And these are our fundamentals. So healthy media consumption looks different for everyone. There's a lot of prescriptive stuff out there saying you have to do this, you have to delete this app, you have to get rid of that. But it's actually very individualized, much like what we can eat. And that social technologies are not a substitute for social connection or meaning making. This is a lot of what's happening, is that these technologies are becoming the way we connect. They're becoming where we go to find meaning and figure out what's going on in the world, right? Not a substitute. And that this idea that media noise is getting louder and louder and louder and more overwhelming, and that people need space and support for personal reflection and character development so that we can create resilience and meaning and purpose in order to thrive in this environment of media overwhelm. Okay, and the talk was called Pathways. So the first pathway we're going to start with is pathways toward yourselves. So this is the part that's for you. And so the next slides are going to seem a little strange, perhaps, because as I was up this morning having my coffee, petting my dog, feeling pretty happy, thinking, what does this audience really need to hear, right? I have the talks that I always give, but what about this audience? And I thought, well, I think probably all of you here as either faith leaders or people of the faith are concerned with compassion and what this is doing to our ability to care about other people. And you may have heard in around 2009, 2010, there was this big thing in the media about we're losing our empathy, right? Everyone's less empathic. The average person in 2009 was less empathic than 75% of people in 1979, right? So in 30 years, people became way less empathic. And I heard about this and I thought, maybe I'm just the perennial optimist here, but I thought that doesn't seem true to me in my lived experience. It doesn't seem like people are falling apart here. And there became this statement that we're in an empathy deficit. I believe it was Obama who said this, right? There's an empathy deficit, and that's the problem. Over time, I began to think, are we in an empathy deficit? Or are we empathically overwhelmed by the amount of pain and suffering we have access to, right? To Barry's point, 25 years ago, we couldn't necessarily, if you weren't online, or let's say 30 years ago to make it safe, you couldn't access the pain and suffering of billions of people all of the time. You could get your little dose of it in the morning paper or the nightly news, but it was not constant 24/7 access to the pain and suffering of billions of people. And so when they say we're having an empathy deficit, I think perhaps it's the opposite, that these technologies are extracting from us the empathy that we have, such that we have very little left to give to the people in our immediate proximity, right? And so, anyway, I added these slides as just something I thought would hopefully resonate with this audience and something I think about a lot, and what we can do about that. And maybe the last thing I'll say on this point is I teach classes on empathy, and I think something that's missing there in the conversation is the distinction between empathy or the emotional contagion aspect of empathy, right? That we are social creatures and we pick up on the emotions of others and we take on those emotions in many cases, right? We see something really sad on our phone, we feel sad. We see somebody really angry on our phone, we feel angry. And the distinction between that sort of emotional contagion and then true compassion, which is just holding our emotions on our own, holding our responsibility for our own emotional state, and then feeling compassion for other people and the desire to help, the desire to change their circumstances, and the way in which true compassion is so much less exhausting than that emotional contagion that's kind of being provoked and exacerbated by these social technologies. Okay, and so now we're coming back to this smoking metaphor. And yeah, it's kind of scary, right? What is happening to the fabric of society here? But I want to talk a little bit now about why this smoking metaphor isn't quite right. So we like to think of media consumption more like food consumption, right? Because actually these social technologies have a lot of benefits. They've organized a lot of activist movements. They've resulted in, I think Gen Z is, while also anxious, they're the most tolerant of previous generations compared to previous generations because of the positive impacts of the internet, of being exposed to things. And so I kind of derailed myself there, but the point is, when we think about our media consumption, it's like food. It's different for everyone. Some people can handle certain things and other people can't. And I think there's kind of archetypes of different types of media consumers, like the people that are really interested in keeping up with the 24-hour news cycle and are really angry. Does anybody, either you are one of those or know one of those people? I know one, right? You kind of get hooked in that, like, I want to know everything and be mad about it. Right? It's okay. That happens. And so my point with this is that we have to learn for ourselves what we can handle consuming, right? Some people can eat gluten and other people can't. And some people can eat dairy and other people can't. I, for example, can eat exorbitant amounts of cheese, whatever genetic or like lottery I won, I can eat insane amounts of cheese and feel totally fine. But that's not going to be true for everybody, right? And so I think that when we get really prescriptive about telling people this is how to do media consumption, I hesitate to adopt some of those ideas. And so I like to think about it like, again, like a little meal. And that when we sit down, we sit and hold for a minute and think, you know, kind of like Winnie here. Just, he's not eating yet, we're just thinking about it. What is going to bring me joy in what I'm about to consume? Is it possible to get some joy from this? And I'm not the first person to say that media consumption is like food consumption. There's a pyramid here. And so this is the work of other people. I'm not promoting this pyramid by any means. In fact, I put it here a little bit to offer critique because they're sort of saying, here's the healthy things. And chats are included in this bottom most healthy area. Anybody here been in a toxic chat thread? Yeah, me too. So I would not put that at the bottom of my food pyramid, my media pyramid, right? And so I think even this level, while people are trying to kind of say, and I think there's some truth to this, right? Certainly like books and art are better than InfoWars, right? There's some truth to this, but also there's the level of self-understanding and self-awareness that we need to have to know what's really good for us. And so if we want to start eating better media to improve our mental and spiritual health, what are we going to do? So it's this idea of cultivating personal resilience. And so when I think about this, there's sort of two aspects to the equation. There's the social technologies or the technology environment, and then there's ourselves. And we can change it from both angles. So when we talk about changing the technology environment, do you guys have your notifications turned off? Probably do right now because you're in a room with the talk, it's being recorded. But in your daily lives, do you have them off? Good. Excellent. Well, you're not the people who need to be here. That's great. The amount of times that this happens that I go to give a talk and the people in the room already know it all because they care. Anyway, my point is, if you haven't yet, turn off your notifications from anybody who's not a person. There are various applications available for focus and reward that I can talk about later if people want help with those. And then this one I think is particularly useful. So feed and follow curation, meaning curate your feed and who you follow and remove things. If you're going to go on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever it is, the algorithm is designed to feed you the most outrageous, polarizing garbage you've ever seen. And so if you allow the algorithm to drive the content you're seeing, you're going to see the most outrageous, polarizing garbage you've ever seen, which is engaging, right? That's their bottom line. But you can actually go in and train the algorithm. No, I want to see this. I like this. I want this. So that when you go into these platforms, you're seeing the information that you chose rather than what the algorithm is telling you is for you. It's for you, right? The For You page. I'll do one quick aside. I think I have time. In my personal life, I went on to try to find a video about how to do push-ups with good form. Right? I'm getting kind of older and I don't want to hurt myself here. Let's just make sure I'm doing this right. And then my pages became full of like female fitness influencers and all this stuff. And I thought, I watched one video about how to do push-ups. This is crazy, right? And so this is what I'm speaking to, is that if you don't give the algorithm enough information about what you really want, it's going to feed you garbage. Okay. And so when we think about examining our media consumption habits, I'm not going to run through this in its entirety, but the practice is kind of similar to anything, to just begin noticing without judgment. Right? What am I consuming? Why am I consuming it? How does this make me feel? Does it feel good to check the news first thing in the morning every day? Maybe not. But maybe it does, right? It's not right or wrong. Some people might say, yeah, I feel informed, I feel connected to the global world, and that's okay too. And then what less healthy media do you want to consume in moderation? So I refer to these as kind of the Oreo equivalents. My favorite media Oreo is that there is a meme account on Instagram specifically targeting elder millennials. Like the memes are for me. I'm the target audience. I go on there, I love it. Right? This is my daily Oreo. So, we can have some Oreos. It's okay. It's about the idea of not eating ice cream for every meal every day. And then how do you begin to notice which media consumption feels healthy and joyful? And I bring up joyful because I don't think the algorithm really is designed to promote joy. Right? There's a lot of good people out there doing good things. And there's a lot of even representations of that, but it's not amplified to come to the forefront of all of the media that's out there. So we kind of have to look for it. Okay, so that was the technology side, and then thinking about the practices, transitioning to the self. How do I begin to notice what media I'm consuming, how that's making me feel? And then we can also change the self. And so I imagine many of you are doing these sorts of things already. Meditation or breathing exercises. Thank you, Barry, getting the nervous system regulated. Movement breaks. Reinforcing our success experiences. So this was how I started making change, right? Was that I would begin when I noticed myself getting into mine's Instagram, getting into the Instagram. Every time I stopped myself, I would throw a huge party for myself. Right? Like, you did it. You noticed and you did it and you stopped. Good. The way you would with a dog or a small child. Right? Like, yeah, you did it. Because it's really hard. And so in the beginning, kind of just noticing that and celebrating when you're like, yes, I noticed that Facebook post was making me feel bad about myself and I just closed the window. Just closed the window. Okay. And so in the setting intentions and reflecting on our goals and values, this is where I'm going to take my 1 minute of self-promotion. My team and I have developed a 4-week experience, which is focused on the power of intention and self-reflection. Again, as kind of opposed to a lot of the prescriptive methodologies that are out there. And so in this, participants reflect on their current behaviors, their media consumption behaviors, their goals for change, and then they do these little weekly journal entries and submit survey responses that assess their levels of social media use and their other mental health outcomes. And they're choosing their own goals for change here. and their intentions are based on their own values. So speaking of seeing really good results, this is the survey that assesses social media addiction. This is a standard psychological survey, and so you can see with our time on this axis, right? They start this experience of self-reflection, figuring out their values, their goals, checking in with themselves. And the people in the blue line start at a healthy level, end at a healthy level. But for our folks that have either problematic or clinical social media use, right, they come down, I need to put a dotted line here, but the cutoff for healthy is 17. And so basically everybody comes down to a healthy level by the end of the 4 weeks. And so it does work. And I think it's no surprise that having people reflect and connect to their values and how they want to be spending their precious time, that is more effective than prescriptively telling people, put your phone down, right? Especially adolescents, that just makes them want it more. Tell you can't have something. Okay, and so this is our next pathway, compassion for you or young people, youth in your life. And so this is kind of probably you know this already, but if you don't, this is data from Sapien Labs, which is an organization I love and recommend their work a lot if you're interested in that. And so here we see the age of first smartphone ownership. And this axis is something called the mental health quotient, which is used by scientists to study mental health overall. So it asks questions that put you somewhere on a scale from thriving to distressed. And so when they poll males and females, when they're between 18 and 24, so now they're young adults, they're asking them about their mental health. They're also asking them, when did you first get a smartphone? And so if you're a female, 18 to 24, who got your first smartphone when you were 6, your mental health in adulthood is way worse than if you got your first smartphone when you were 18. You follow the graph? Yeah, okay. And so same thing, and this is just the inverse where we see the percentage of people who are distressed and struggling, who are scoring in that category, also much higher if you got your smartphone at a younger age. And this is where I'll plug the work of Jonathan Haidt. So if you're not familiar, he wrote The Anxious Generation, came out fairly recently. It's a great book, and they are working to try to promote the ban of smartphones until you're 16. So no smartphones in schools, no social media until you're 16. I think this is great work, super important, and it's going to require more than that because ultimately the information is here, the internet is here. The young people are going to find a way to find it, even if you tell them they can't have it. Has anybody met a teenager? Yeah, they're going to find a way. And unfortunately, they're smarter than us. Well, then me. I won't throw you all in that boat with me. They're smarter than me. Okay, and so here's just some stats on addiction. And I think I bring up the percent of parents here also because I think a lot of times we get really blaming the teens in this situation, but parents also check their devices at least hourly and report feelings of addiction. Okay, and I won't do too much of the sciencey stuff, I promise. I'm going to keep it, pretty digestible, but I do want to talk about it because I think it feeds into the next thing really well. When I teach this, people often say, oh, Annie, people were scared of the printing press, and people threw tantrums when we invented television. It's going to be fine. But things are different this time, and I'll get into why. So none of the other technologies have ever had so much social control, right? You weren't told in the newspaper how you compare directly to all of the other kids in your class or all of your neighbors or all of your friends who graduated from high school with you, right? Different this time. And so when I talk about, this is about adolescent development. And so at this age, they have accelerated growth in the limbic system. This part of your brain does social cognition and emotions. And they also have heightened dopamine in that system, which is motivation and reward seeking. So you have high motivation and reward seeking for specifically social and emotional things. And so there's a developmental mismatch at this age where the limbic region is pretty developed, right? This part that does emotions, but then the prefrontal, this part that does impulse control and executive function and planning and all of the adult tasks, is not developed yet. And so you end up with high susceptibility to social rewards. And this becomes a problem when we introduce the social technologies, because now they have the option of accessing a potential social reward at any moment. And it might be really big. And I think that this is an interesting study where they had basically a virtual peers likes, right? So these were not real people. It was a fake app with fake friends. And the adolescents knew it was fake, and they knew the people weren't real. And yet, the neural activations moderated and changed their behavior, right? So it's like they can't even help it. Knowing the app isn't real, knowing the likes aren't real, yet I care, right? And so I bring this up to try to help lead the conversation toward more compassion for the young people as they're interacting with these things, right? They have a neurobiology, they have a phase of development. Looks like we're doing okay out there. Everybody's eyes are still open and there's lots of faces. It's good. You're doing better than my 9 a.m. college class. Okay. And so bringing back this point of social control. So here are some of the reasons why it's different this time in comparison to the newspaper or TV or other previous forms of media. I'm really interested in focusing on this part because I think it's the most damaging, both for young people and for just society in general. And so if we think about the opposite of addiction, it's connection. Real connection, not the connection myth that the tech giants are selling to us, right? Connectivity, no, actual connection. And so thinking about how we can facilitate bringing experiences to ourselves and to young people, like all of you showing up here today, right? To be with other people and to help bring our young people into spaces where they can be with each other in real physical three-dimensional form. So that ends the high susceptibility to social rewards. There's also this bit about low self-regulation at that age. So the circuitry, like I was speaking about, that front part that is involved in regulation is still developing through and beyond the teen years until you're about 20 or 25, depending who you reference. And so also when we see the young people on their phones all the time, I would argue that there are many adults out there whose self-regulation circuitry is still developing. Myself included sometimes, let's be real. And so there's actually, but the sort of happy ending here is that there's actually a golden opportunity with young people in particular, because you've maybe heard this before, but this idea that the teen brain is like no brakes and no steering wheel, right? You kind of hear that. I don't know if you've heard that metaphor before, but it's about this idea that it's like driving a car with no brakes and no steering wheel because your prefrontal cortex isn't developed yet. But in reality, what this means is that there is a unique and supercharged opportunity in this age to grow self-regulation, which I think is really cool potentially for a lot of the folks that are out there creating solutions. And there's so many. I work in this space also just to give a little hope. There are so many organizations working on this problem and aware of it and trying to bring solutions to our young people. Specifically in relationship to this, how can we teach them to grow these skills that are necessary to thrive? Because whether we ban the phones or not, the internet's here. We are post-internet. And so many young folks and adults don't actually want to be on their phone all the time. I think this is a common, at least when I go to a fair number of parent networks. When I go there, they're really frustrated. The kids are on their phone all the time. But when you go and talk to them directly, which I've done, you talk to hundreds of young people, they say things like this. The tricky part about growing up with social media is how dangerous and addictive it is. People are always glued to their phones, but so am I, and I hate that. This is a 15-year-old. So they know. And this is the other really awesome thing about Gen Z and Gen Alpha, is that they're so adaptive and like interested in figuring out what to do. I feel like that resistance that comes as we age just isn't there. So really promising, I think. And so these are some other things about what teens are wanting adults to know. And this one I think is also not helped by the media, right? Because the fearful information gets amplified, and so then the parents are scared naturally because we want to protect our children. That makes sense. But when adults are thinking of online connections only in terms of predators, we're kind of missing out on opportunities to support the young people in what they're actually experiencing. I love this one. Stop blaming us for getting into drama online. And you can't always shut off your phone and be done with it. These conflicts carry over into the real world. So one girl I talked to was saying that she was at home. One of her friends, I'm going to get a little dark here for just a moment, one of her friends had been in a really extreme school conflict and was now really at least claiming to seriously be considering self-harm. And so this little girl's on her phone trying to talk her friend out of this situation. Meanwhile, mom's standing there yelling at her, put your phone down, put your phone down. And she's like, you don't understand, I can't, right? And so I'm not saying that that's always what's happening, but it might be what's happening sometimes. And if our approach is to be angry or to assume they're just on TikTok, that's not helpful. Okay, and so how do we talk about this? What are some of the conversation starters we can use? And so I think that probably here, maybe this part is not as needed, but in many communities, we need to revisit these things, these fundamentals of conversation, so that we're going to speak from a place of compassion. We are going to actively listen and assume they have the best intentions. And I think sometimes actively listening to young people when you feel like maybe you know better, I don't know, I do that sometimes. I teach 19-year-olds, and it can be hard sometimes to just listen actually to what they're saying and what they need. And so right here, I will operate from the belief that we are all on the same team, but I put an asterisk there because I said, except maybe the gigantic tech companies making the trillions of dollars who might not be on our team. But with that exception, we're going to agree that everybody else is on the same team. And so some tips here, asking over assuming. And so we have heard directly from young people about the digital problems that are most relevant in their lives. I spoke about this already, so I won't repeat them, but the quotes are here for you. Basically to just say, here's another one, I wish I didn't use my phone so much, right? To say that they understand the problem, maybe more than we're giving them credit for. Empathy over eye rolling. So this means trying to really imagine, and maybe let's just do this, try to really imagine what it's like. Thank you, Barry, for setting this up, right? Because when you set it up, I was, 13 or 14. That many years ago. And so it was perfect for me. And to think about what it's like to not be able to leave that behind, right? I used to, if something bad happened at school, I could come home and cry to mom and nobody could get to me. I could just be left alone until I went back to school the next day. And by the time you went back to school, it was over. That's not how it is now. They can't get a break. Ever. And it's really, I think if you really imagine what that would feel like at that age, it's hard not to feel heartbroken. Maybe I'll also say that one of the strategies I recommend are there parents here? Is this relevant to talk like? Okay. Another thing I would do as a child is if there was an event or something I didn't want to go to, I would tell my mom or my dad, and I would say, I'm really scared, I don't want to go. And then mom would say, okay, you can just tell them I said you couldn't go. You can just blame me. If you don't want the social consequences, just say, mom said you can't go. I'm done. And I was like, oh, thank you. Okay, good. And I wonder if there's not a similar strategy to be taken with the phones, like setting it up where we're on the same team. And if this is happening or the conflict is persisting, just tell them, you can come to me and give me your phone. And then the next day at school, you can say, mom took my phone away. Dad took my phone away, right? And now it's you and your kid on the same team instead of the kid and the phone on the same team and you're the bad guy, right? So my point here is getting to that empathy piece of really thinking about what's happening for them. It's hard. And then complexity over commandments. So thinking through the complexity of, and this is really relevant to our approach at Post-Internet Project. There's a lot of the kind of commandments out there. Put your phone down, delete this app, do it this way. Right, but I think it's a much more complex issue than that. And then this, leading by example, right? We got to put our own phones down. I hear that from so many kids. My mom's yelling at me to put my phone down, but she's on her phone while she's driving, so why should I? Right? So it's tricky. And so here are some specifics. You can ask things like, what's your favorite app or game right now, right? These are not accusatory. This is just curious, right? What's your favorite thing right now? Can you show me how it works? What do you like about it? Why do you like it? What are your favorite accounts or people you follow? Why do you like them? I think some of us could benefit to ask ourselves this question. What am I following and why? And why do I like it? And if it's not bringing me positive mental health outcomes or information that is useful to my personal life, meaningful to me, why am I following this thing? Just don't. Your attention and cognition is precious. You don't have to give it to people. Okay, stop. Get me going on these rants and I can't. But the why is really important. Asking yourself or the young person in your life, why? Go back to being a 2-year-old. Why? Why are you following that? Why do you like that? Why are you doing that? So this is another thing that gets a little twisted when people go to talk about this in their family networks, is I hear in the parent networks a lot of them saying, well, what are you going to do? Why you need to sleep with your phone out of your room? You need to whatever. But if we really focus on the text here, I think just little rephrasings can help a lot. Like, what are some of our family's habits with devices like our phones or TV, right? What are we currently doing as a family? Or do any of our habits, right, making it about us, again, this kind of idea that we're on the same team and not saying, what are you doing? Are there any, you can hear this, right? You can hear the difference if you go to talk to someone and you say, are there any habits we could try to change versus what are the habits you need to change, right? It comes across so differently. And then this piece of emotional well-being being at the root of it all. So if you get through those easier, kind of curious questions, then you can get into the maybe more meaty questions. So do you ever feel uncomfortable or worried or anxious when you're online? Why are you feeling that way? Do you ever feel like you've spent too much time online? Do you ever feel pressured to be online? I think particularly for adults, it's more of the keeping up with the news, and for the kids, it's about their friends, right? If you miss somebody's, I've had kids tell me that they set alarms in the middle of the night to be able to check the Snapchats so that because if they go to school the next day and they haven't seen somebody's snap and it was something important, they'll be out of the loop. So they'll set alarms to wake themselves up in the middle of the night to make sure that when they go to school the next morning, they've seen all the snaps. Not even kidding. Whoa. So, do you ever feel pressured to be online? Maybe a good question to ask. That's kind of an extreme case, but. So, if you have the ability to have a phone, probably some of you do, if you just point your camera right here, it would get no pressure, and I'm going to say a few more things while we wrap up. Well, I wrap up perfectly on time. So we ask that you complete this form, and this is really just for me. Basically, my team and I, our team is really lean right now. We are just 5 to 6 people, most of whom are doing this work for free, or at best for $15 an hour, which is not a living wage in Denver or Boulder, or probably anywhere, definitely not here. And so, yeah, filling out that form with the feedback just helps us make the quality of our work and deliverables better so that we understand what's meaningful to people, what's landing, what's not. So thank you. It's not too long, it's a few questions. And then to bring back this final point, which is that I really do believe your attention is sacred, and so it's a gift that you gave it to me for the past hour or so. I really appreciate that, which is, I wrote academic grants for years, right? I got pretty good at that game. Now I'm moving into nonprofit world. And, my whole identity in the business is around helping people find meaning and purpose in the digital age, helping people come back to themselves in this media overwhelm. And so I started applying for nonprofit grants, and one of the granting organizations came back to me and said, well, with only 60 followers, you must not be a real organization. And I said, I am not quick to anger, but that one got me. And so I say that to say, if you want to follow us, we are on Facebook, Post Internet Project. We are on Instagram, postinternet.project. And we really appreciate those follows. And if you don't, we don't post very much because of what I said, our belief system. But if you do want to follow, we really appreciate it. And that is all. Thank you.